Let's talk about the saviour of humanity in the 41st millennium, one of the most powerful forces in the entire setting, the mummified corpse in his glorified office chair. The God Emperor of mankind is an immortal perpetual and the most powerful human psyche in existence. He acted as humanity's guide on their journey to dominance of the Milky Way, and is now considered by many to be a god, the embodiment of order and the most potent foe of chaos in the galaxy. His presence in the warp maintains the Astronomicon, the psychic beacon that makes faster-than-light travel possible for humanity, and which is vital to the Imperium's shipping, transportation, commerce and communication. For over 10,000 years he has sat immobile, entombed within the Golden Throne as his body slowly withers, kept intact only by the cybernetic mechanisms of the throne and by his own psychic might, itself bolstered by the daily sacrifice of thousands of lives. However, this was not always the case, for once he walked among humanity, guiding them from the shadows before revealing himself to unite Terra and reclaim the galaxy after Old Night, until he was mortally wounded by his son Horus at the height of his heresy. So who was the Emperor? Where did he come from? And what led to his descent from golden demigod to shriveled husk? There are countless creation myths for the leader of humanity, however the one that Games Workshop seems to have decided is canon is that he is the collective reincarnation of the first human psykers, the shamans of prehistoric Terra, born somewhere in Anatolia in the 8th millennium BC. By this time, the four main chaos gods had not yet fully formed. However, the Immaterium had increasingly become disturbed by humanity's collective psyche, leading to the loss of the shaman's ability to reincarnate. Instead, upon death, the shaman's souls were consumed by demons and other warp entities. Recognising that something needed to be done about this, the shamans gathered in a grand conclave and decided to pool their collective psychic energies into one soul that would inhabit a single human body, creating an individual they called the New Man. The thousands of shamans simultaneously took poison, the rush of their souls into the Immaterium, overwhelming the demons that sought to feed on them, before coalescing into one soul that, a year later, was born into a settlement of farmers and herders to a normal mother and father. This father, incidentally, may well have been Abel from the biblical story of Abel and Cain, as in Emperor of Mankind he tells a story that is suspiciously similar. The death of his father taught the young emperor that humanity needed law, order and the guidance of a wise ruler if ever they were to reach their full potential. For 38,000 years thereafter, he travelled the globe, shepherding humanity along a narrow path that only he could see. In times of trouble he became a crusader, a religious leader, or even a messiah. At other times he remained a backstage contributor to events, as an advisor to kings, a court magician, or a pioneering scientist, although at all times he aided and guided humanity, helping them develop into a species capable of uniting the galaxy. As humanity grew in population and spread across the globe, the warp became increasingly disturbed, with the extreme sides of the human mind feeding the beings that would develop into the great powers of chaos. Despite the Emperor's efforts to promote peace and harmony across Terra, the instinctive values of mankind that led to discord could never be truly eradicated, and some of his plans backfired, leading to eras of war and destruction rather than peace and prosperity. By the end of the European Middle Ages, with their widespread war, disease and political double dealings, Khorne, Nurgle and Tzeentch had all fully awoken. Still, the Emperor maintained anonymity, unwilling to take a direct and open role at the head of humanity, even as their civilization spread across the stars during the Dark Age of technology, and eventually collapsed during the Age of Strife. However, with the fall of the Eldari and the birth of Slaanesh, leading to the end of the warp storms that had prevented interstellar communication and travel from the Sol system, the Emperor determined that he had no choice but to more directly steer humanity, or to see them go extinct due to the perils of Old Night. He began the unification of Terra in the late 29th millennium, at the end of the Age of Strife. With the aid of another perpetual, Malcador the Sigillite, the Emperor fought a series of campaigns against the other warlords on Terra. His most potent weapon during this time were the legions of Proto-Astartes known as Thunder Warriors. Despite their skill in battle surpassing that of even the later Legiones Astartes, the Thunder Warriors were far from perfect creations, and were only ever intended to be used during the Unification Wars. Many had difficulty coping with the rapid changes wrought upon their body, with their natural lifespans generally being incredibly short, and many Thunder Warriors suffered from mental instability and even psychosis. In an effort to create a superior breed of super soldiers than the Thunder Warriors, the Emperor entered the Warp and struck an unknown bargain with the Chaos Gods in return for the knowledge on how to create the primarchs. This is what is colloquially known as a bad move, and it's my personal theory that the Emperor offered the powers of chaos the service of half of the primarchs upon their creation, as this would explain his otherwise baffling treatment of some of them, such as Angron. Whatever the terms of the deal were, the Emperor began the creation of his 20 sons, using his own DNA as the basis for their genome. They were intended to be his generals, diplomats, and consuls during the Great Crusade. However, before their birth, the child primarchs were scattered across the galaxy by Tzeentch, leaving the Emperor to create the Astartes legions from the genetic material that remained on Terra. Following the Battle of Mount Ararat, with the unity of Terra finally achieved, the remaining Thunder Warriors were almost entirely wiped out by a force of custodians and several thousand newborn Astartes of the First Legion. With Terra fully unified and the Thunder Warriors culled, the Emperor began preparations for the Great Crusade in order to re-establish contact with the scattered human colonies and to find his lost primarchs. He created both the Astropath Corps and the Astronomicon to enable communication and safer travel across the stars, before leading his 20 legions of Astartes warriors to clear the Sol system of Xenos species, signing a peace treaty with the Mechanicum on Mars in the process. It is likely that the Emperor himself intentionally created the Cult Mechanicum by trapping a shard of an ancient godlike being inside the planet, although that is quite a hefty conspiracy theory that deserves its own video. This treaty formalised the creation of the Imperium of Man and established the imperial bureaucracy on Terra, integrating the Mechanicum into the government and providing the Emperor with the technology and production capacity to extend his crusade out of the Sol system. As the Emperor's expeditionary fleets ventured out into the stars, they rediscovered lost human colonies, destroyed alien empires, and claimed vast new territory for the Imperium. Above all, they also rediscovered the lost and scattered primarchs, who once found were placed in command of the legions created from their gene seed, and played a major part in forging their father's empire. Together, these forces brought thousands of worlds into compliance, establishing the rule of the Imperium over them and instilling the values of the Imperial Truth, an atheistic faith in science and technology that rejected superstitious and religious beliefs and held that humanity were the rightful rulers of the galaxy, while xenospecies were to be exterminated outright if they prevented even the slightest threat or obstacle to the Imperium. The Emperor hoped that by promoting this idea, he could remove the need for faith and the other irrational aspects of the human mind, thereby weakening the power and influence of chaos. By this time, he had already eradicated the ancient religions of Terra, personally witnessing the destruction of the last church on the planet after going full Reddit mode on its priest. The Imperial Truth also forbade the development of true artificial intelligence, as the Emperor was present during the Dark Age of technology and witnessed the Men of Iron aiding in the destruction of their creator's interstellar civilization. This is why servitors and the like exist in 40k, as they are ultimately powered by human brains rather than artificial intelligence. As such, when the expeditionary fleets encountered human civilizations that had developed AI, they were to be treated as potential dangers and exterminated. After around 200 years at the head of the Great Crusade, the Emperor returned to Terra and appointed his most trusted son, Horus Lupercal, Primarch of the Lunar Wolves Legion, as War Master in his stead. This enabled him to oversee the secret Webway project, which would allow a far more efficient means of interstellar travel, and was eventually intended to completely sever humanity from the need for the warp in its entirety, further weakening the Chaos Gods. The key to this plan was the Golden Throne, an artifact from the Dark Age of technology that allowed human access to the Eldari-constructed Webway tunnels. However, the Emperor had to personally shield the human-created sections of the Webway from warp incursions, which required him to remain on the Golden Throne continuously while the portal was open. However, the Emperor's secrecy surrounding the Webway project led to him hiding the reason for his return to Terra from his sons. It was this, as well as his decision to shift control of the Imperium's government from the Primarchs to the Terran nobility and bureaucrats, that led to discord between him and his sons that would eventually grow into the Horus heresy, where half of the Primarchs, led by War Master Horus, turned against the Emperor and the Imperium. At the outset of the heresy, in order to warn his father, Magnus the Red attempted to psychically project himself into the chamber where the Golden Throne was located. This attempt damaged the psychic shields around the Webway, allowing hordes of demons to pour through the portal into the throne room. While the combined might of the Legio Custodes and the Sisters of Silence successfully fought back the demonic assault, only the Emperor was powerful enough to keep the portal closed and prevent the Imperial Palace from being overrun. Because of Magnus destroying the Webway project, the Emperor declared that the Imperium of Man was doomed to eventually fall, and admitted that for the first time, even he did not know what to do to save mankind from extinction. But remember, Magnus did nothing wrong. As the Horus heresy reached its climax with the Siege of Terra, the Emperor was forced to remain on the Golden Throne permanently, except for the few moments when Malcador the Sigillite took his place to allow the Emperor to teleport aboard Horus's flagship along with the Primarch Sanguinius. Due to Horus's empowerment by the Chaos Gods, this assault led to the death of Sanguinius and the wounding of the Emperor, as Horus tore off one of his arms and shattered his internal organs, although the Emperor was ultimately successful in killing Horus and destroying his soul so that he could never return. Near death, the Emperor was rescued by Rogel Dawn, Primarch of the Imperial Fists, who oversaw his internment within the Golden Throne after it had been modified into a life support machine. There he has remained in an unending stasis for over 10,000 years, his dying body decaying at a glacially slow pace, and his mind only sustained by the sacrifice of 1,000 psykers every day. The Imperial cult, after its establishment as the state religion of the Imperium in the 32nd millennium, claimed that by being entombed within the Golden Throne, the Emperor had ascended to his proper place in the Immaterium as the one true god of mankind. Incidentally, this religion had its roots in the Lectitio Divinitatis, a book written by Lorgar, one of the traitor primarchs, and the primarch responsible for the corruption of Horus himself. While the Golden Throne now lies at the heart of the Imperial Palace on Terra, guarded by an elite bodyguard contingent of the Adeptus Custodes, the Emperor's consciousness is spread across the galaxy, watching over humanity, keeping the ruinous powers at bay, and maintaining the Astronomicon. Despite his condition, he can still cryptically communicate his wishes through tarot decks, visions, and dreams, although the only person to have had direct contact with him over the past 10,000 years was Guilliman, after he was awoken from stasis during the 13th Black Crusade. The Emperor can also provide psychic protections against chaos and demons, and is believed to be able to influence the physical universe in other ways, such as creating a warp storm during the Age of Apostasy to express his anger over the usurpation of his government. Should he die, the Astronomicon would fail, and humanity would no longer be able to travel through the warp. The Imperium would then disintegrate and devolve into civil war. This reliance on the Emperor for guidance and protection is the foundation for the Emperor's divinity as held by the Imperial cult, and the collective belief of trillions throughout the galaxy has massively empowered the Emperor's mind and soul within the warp, which may very well have led to him truly becoming a god, allowing him to perform feats far beyond even what he could do while alive. However, the Emperor may not have much time left. At the end of the 41st millennium, the Adeptus Mechanicus revealed that the life support systems of the Golden Throne had begun to fail, and the tech priests no longer had the knowledge to repair them. Unless some solution can be found, the Emperor's body will inevitably die, although it's unclear whether, as a perpetual, he would be able to reincarnate. And that is the origin and history of the Emperor in 40k. If I've missed any details, or if you have any ideas for future videos, please leave a comment. Like, subscribe, all the rest, and I'll see you in the next video.